Good morning and welcome. Today's short video is on the repeatable market cycle of the price line, in which case this is the yellow line that you see here in region 1 against the 0, which is the 60 EMA. And this is a very repeatable pattern because once you get yourself acclimated to seeing this, you'll see it all the time because it just repeats over and over again. Once you find that price action pretty much begins to stay below the 0, which is the 60 EMA, you will notice that it's composed of several parts. It would enter the sprint trend, and the sprint trend is once again demarcated by the blue MACD. And then it'll go into the marathon trend, where the white MACD either just plain goes sideways and the blue MACD just wiggles either opposite what the trend is doing about the 0. And then the pattern will repeat itself again. It'll go into a sprint mode, once again demarcated by the blue MACD here, 0 crossing down and then ending the cycle by going back into the mids. And then it's going to go into the marathon mode. And here the marathon mode is much more marathon-y because the volume remains below the 0, unlike here. This kind of threw you off when the volume went above the 0. And you would notice here on a true marathon trend, the blue MACD pretty much remains opposite to what the volume is doing and where the white MACD is. And then the market will go into a recovery phase where it's going to contract back towards the 0, as you see here. And the recovery phase may go into fruition and you would end this downward cycle. Or it would go back again and start a sprint trend, once again demarcated by the blue, 0 crossing down through the 0 and then crossing back up into the lower mids here for the downward sprint trend. And then, as you see here, we go back into a marathon trend, and this time you find that the blue MACD is essentially just going sideways in the danger zone, sideways in the danger zone. But what you see consistent is that the volume remains below the 0 line in region 2. And then we once again go into recovery mode. And this is how recovery mode would look. And this pattern repeats over and over again. Sprint, marathon, recovery. Sprint, marathon, recovery. And then at recovery, two things will happen. Either we come to fruition and 0 cross above the 0, as in this case of the downtrend, ending the downtrend, or as we saw here on this recovery, we just plain 0 bounce back down again, starting the sprint trend over. Once you get used to this pattern, and this is a pattern that you need to know that it exists all the time, you need to convince your subconscious of that, then it becomes so much easier to know what the market is doing. Now let's go back and look at an uptrend. So here's a sprint, and we didn't have a marathon mode. It automatically went into recovery mode. And we have the sprint again up here. And then it went into a marathon mode through here. Why do I call it a marathon mode? Even though the volume remains below the 0, and this is quote-unquote still an uptrend, it's because the white MACD remains above the 0. So the white MACD essentially demarcates the marathon trend. Once again, we have sprint, If I were to break this down in a finer detail, it would really be recovery turn into sprint, and then turn into a recovery, and then go into a marathon for the long, and then a sprint again, and then into a recovery and sprint. So the reason why this becomes a recovery and sprint is because of the nature of the blue MACD popping outside the lower mids here with the volume with you and the white MACD having entered into the danger zone. That would have been perfect place to go just take that short because that is your sprinter's trend. And then hold that short until the blue MACD re-enters back into the mids headed towards the danger zone. Let's look at another pattern. So here we go, another downtrend, and then in this downtrend you have a recovery from the uptrend, an uptrend going into recovery, then going into a sprint. Actually the sprint is here. Sprint, and then a marathon, mini marathon phase here, a sprint again, and then a recovery, bounce off that zero, a mini sprint, a mini recovery, one sprint again, and then a mini recovery, or you've entered into a marathon part of the trend. And this is a marathon trend composed of another sprint, another marathon, and then finally another mini sprint, and then we enter into recovery. And then we bounce off at that zero, going to a mini sprint down, and then going back into a recovery. And everything here becomes pretty much very messy. That's why we have a rule when you find a white MACD inside the danger zone, it's best not to play in it. Plus, we couldn't play this anyway because the blue MACD never popped out of the mids. So, and then here we go. We have a sprint down. We entered into the marathon phase, which turns into a recovery. And then we have the sprint up. And then we turn into a recovery to go for a sprint down. And yes, we could have taken this for a short as the white MACD re-enters the mids, because this is our sprinter's trend right there. So as you go to your historical, familiarize yourself with the parts of the cycle of a trend. Once again, once a downtrend begins, you've got your sprint, you got your recovery or marathon, which will have another sprint, another recovery, another sprint, another recovery, another sprint in this case, and then another recovery, until finally it becomes a sprint to the upside, and then we go into the marathon, goes into recovery, and then finally a sprint to the downside. We go into the marathon, and the marathon is composed of recovery, sprints, recovery, sprints, recovery, sprint, and the marathon here continues. As you would notice, the marathons are usually demarcated when that blue MACD just keeps crisscrossing across the zero. And you can see that because of the background coloration that you see here. And recoveries and sprints are demarcated by these long spaces where the background isn't colored. Yep. That's it. That ends this video. Hopefully it's been helpful to you. Many blessings. As you can see here, we've been stuck in an extended recovery, and we either may bounce off that 60 or we may start a new trend up. We don't know. Bottom line is that there's nothing to do because the blue MACD has never left the mids. We're still in it, and the white MACD is just in the danger zone, telling us not to do a darn thing. So many blessings. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.